The 15th of July, 1968, 10:42 a.m. St. Nicolas Avenue, Harlem. Frank Lucas is sitting in the back seat of a black Cadillac Fleetwood, parked 2 blocks from the funeral home, with exactly 17 minutes before Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson's funeral begins. 6 men are positioned outside the car, pretending to smoke. 3 across the street, 3 behind him. One has a 38 revolver. Another carries a shotgun hidden inside a florist's box. On the floor by Frank's feet sits a brown leather bag. Inside it, $96,000 in cash. Clean, counted, exact. Frank knows one thing with certainty. If he steps out of this car the wrong way, he will not make it to the funeral alive. The only question is whether the deal he made at 3:18 a.m. last night is real, or whether it was a lie designed to bring him here to die. 3 weeks earlier, Harlem already felt unstable. Bumpy Johnson was still alive, but barely. On July 7th, just after 2:45 in the morning, Bumpy collapsed inside Wells Restaurant on Lenox Avenue. Frank was there. He watched the strongest man he had ever known struggle to breathe. By the time Frank reached the hospital, it was over. Bumpy Johnson was pronounced dead at 11:45 p.m. Word moved fast. Faster than newspapers, faster than police radios. By sunrise, every power player in Harlem understood the same truth. When a king dies, the throne doesn't stay empty. It gets contested. Frank Lucas had known this moment was coming. For more than 15 years, he had been Bumpy's shadow. Not a flashy lieutenant, not an enforcer. Frank was the quiet one. The man trusted with numbers, not guns, cash pickups, property deeds. Private meetings no one else was allowed to attend. That trust came with enemies. Downtown, the Italian families never liked Frank. To them, he was just a driver who forgot his place. But as long as Bumpy was alive, Frank was untouchable. That protection vanished the moment Bumpy's heart stopped. By the morning of July 8th, Frank had already received 4 phone calls. No voices, just breathing. One call ended with a single sentence. "Don't go to the funeral." That should have been enough. But Frank understood something most men didn't. In Harlem, funerals decide the future. Who shows up, who doesn't, who sits in the front row, and who never walks in at all. What nobody knew yet was that Frank Lucas had been marked for death before Bumpy's body was even cold. At 2:11 a.m. on July 9th, Frank was woken up in his home in Teaneck, New Jersey. His wife lay still beside him as he reached for the phone. The voice on the other end was calm, professional. It named the amount Frank was rumored to control, over $50 million. Then it named how many men would be waiting at the funeral, 9. Then the voice said, "We can cancel it, but it'll cost you." Frank didn't answer. He hung up, and then he sat in the dark for 11 full minutes, without moving. Here's where everything changes. Frank didn't call shooters. He didn't pack bags. He didn't run at 3:18 a.m. He made one call to a man who represented multiple Italian families. A man who owed Bumpy Johnson his life from a debt settled back in 1954. Frank reminded him of that night. The alley, the knife, the body that never hit the pavement because Bumpy intervened. Then Frank made his offer. $96,000 in cash, delivered in public. At the funeral, silence followed. Then the man said, "If you're lying, they'll kill you slow." By July 12th, the rumor was everywhere. Frank Lucas would be dead before Bumpy was buried. Cops heard it. Dealers heard it. Even the funeral home staff whispered about it. Frank heard it too, and he still pressed his suit. Still counted the money twice. Still told his driver to take the long way. Now we're back in the Cadillac. 10:42 AM. Frank checks his watch. He thinks about Bumpy, about the last conversation they had, sitting in a parked car weeks earlier. Bumpy breathing heavy, voice low. "Never let them see you scared," Bumpy told him. "Fear is permission." Frank opens the door. Every sound feels louder. Footsteps, car horns, a distant siren. He steps onto the sidewalk, holding the bag in his left hand. One man shifts his weight. Another reaches under his jacket. Frank doesn't look at them. He walks. Inside the funeral home, the air is thick with flowers and heat. Over 7,000 people will pass through that building today. Politicians, street bosses, preachers, cops pretending not to be cops. And in the second row, exactly where Frank was told they'd be 3 men sit together. Italian suits, black ties, cold eyes. Frank walks straight toward them. He places the bag at their feet. He doesn't sit. He leans in and says quietly, "Bumpy paid his debts. I'm paying mine." For 3 seconds, nobody moves. Then, click, the bag opens. Cash, bundled tight. Exact. Silence. One of the men nods. Just once. Frank turns and walks to the front row. Outside, the 6 men disappear. The funeral begins. What happened in that room reshaped Harlem for the next decade. Frank wasn't just spared. He was acknowledged, not as Bumpy's driver, but as his successor. The Italians didn't love him. The cops didn't trust him. But everyone understood one thing. Frank Lucas could not be touched without starting a war nobody wanted. Within months, Frank expanded faster than anyone expected. By the early 1970 seconds, he controlled heroin routes that bypassed the Mafia entirely. Federal agents would later estimate his organization moved over $1 million a day. And it all traced back to one decision, one funeral, one bag of cash. Years later, when asked why he went, Frank said something simple. "If I didn't show up, I was already dead." And what nobody knew until much later was that this deal didn't just save Frank Lucas. It made him inevitable.